Hello.
Hi,
How you guys doing?
it's Tasha.
And I'm Vanessa. And this is Conversation Project. Where it's our second video, and we started this podcast because we wanted to kind of talk about things that we were thinking and feeling but weren't always seeing reflected in like the mainstream news media.
Yep.
And part of this project is really about not only maybe motivating new dialogue, but also just wanting to see and connect with people who are maybe feeling the same way or thinking the same things, and hopefully through dialogue and community, we can sort of start looking at ways that we can shift the paradigm.
Yep. And we want to know what your ideas on all this stuff are.
This truly is a conversation in the real sense, where we are not pretending to be experts. We are just human beings who
Just
are
a couple of ladies
who are existing in this society and not always feeling in alignment with its value system.
No. I'm just really feeling like now is the time to speak up about things and to have some conversations about things that need to be talked about.
Yeah, because I think we're all sort of feeling this way. And
yeah, I don't think it's just us.
no, we definitely don't think it's just us. And I think that the more we begin to talk about things that might be a little bit non-PC or scary or uncomfortable, might actually allow for us to find new cool ways of paths and actions that we can start to get closer to living in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense for other people, makes sense for looking at humanity as a family, makes sense for living in ways that is more harmonious and connected to nature, and obviously thus ourselves and one another. So last time we talked about...
Yeah, we talked about beauty as an energy, not an image.
which I think as women is of course something that we have a very personal relationship to. Growing up in a media culture that's constantly inundating us with ways that we're not enough and that we're trolls that should live in a bell tower.
Yeah.
And eventually you kind of get to a point where you're like, oh God, I don't want to do
Yeah,
that
just
anymore.
like disconnected from your truth and like your own awesomeness.
Yeah, because we're all fucking awesome.
Dude, everybody's so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I know.
And so we shared a lot on our last week about that. And this week we kind of wanted to talk about as sort of like an appendix to that, of like how we culturally have gotten to the place that we are, because there seems to be a lack of us asking the question, why? Like, why are we doing things?
Yeah, like blindly following things that we've been told, and even like growing up with certain ways of thinking about other people and all those kind of things, and really taking a step back and being like, are those the things that I really feel? Are those the things that I really think? Or are those things that have been impressed upon me since I was basically a fetus?
Totally. And like really taking time and finding ways like, okay, like, well, babies aren't racist.
No.
And babies aren't sexist.
No.
And
they will
animals don't hate each other.
They just want you to play with them in the sandbox and share your toys.
Yeah.
That's actually a good call. That's what babies want. They want you to share.
Yeah.
Your toys.
And so, totally right. That's it. So just kind of like wanting to reflect on this episode a little bit, like how we seem to have deviated so far from nature in a lot of capacities, and now we've kind of become complicit in this machine that nurtures us, but in a way that isn't actually good for us.
Yeah, it doesn't really have your best interest as an individual at heart. And the idea of asking why, like even going so far as to be like, even if we want to ask why, we will stop ourselves from asking why because we're afraid to ask why sometimes too.
Totally. And that's whole like understanding that this fear-based society that we live in, part of that is about quelling this sort of curiosity, this natural curiosity that we have to kind of maybe be the only person in the room who wants to provoke deeper, meaningful conversation, because you just don't want to play small anymore. And why are we not supporting that? So I think the first point that we're going to talk about is that we can see very much reflected in this in society is, why are we blindly and complicitly still agreeing to a system of government and capitalism that we know is no longer serving us and has proven itself to be running amok, shall we say, or transparent with corruption.
Or a total detriment to certain people in society.
Like transparently not working, essentially.
Not working. Greed-based.
So I think it's really interesting. I mean, as human beings, we have a certain set of values, no matter where you're from in the world, no matter what religion or ideology, what culture you grow up in. There's a certain thing amongst us as human beings that we have a truth that we calibrate towards. And that truth is, as humans, we generally like to be happy. And what are the things that make us happy? It feels good to love.
It feels good to be around other people.
It feels good to be in community. It
Yeah.
feels good to laugh. It feels good to be...
To give and then to also receive, to have it be reciprocal and be supported.
To be supported. It feels good to be in a state of loving of self and fulfillment of self by living your truth, whatever that might be. Like if you are into making paintings with your nipples, for example.
Those might be some really cool paintings.
Yeah, or being a chef, or driving a bus, or farming, like whatever
or
that
if
is.
you're old, like the knowledge that you have of the time that you've been on this planet. I think like one of the big things is just talking about how we, sometimes chuck people off to the side who don't fit in the demographic of money making.
Yeah.
So 16 to 65 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Are the people who are served, and then what do you do when you fall outside of that box? What are children doing?
Yeah, so, but I'm just like speaking to the fact that as human beings, we all have this truth that we can identify around the world globally that we calibrate to. And that's peacefulness, that is like autonomy spiritually and emotionally to make our own decisions and to show up in the world how we want to. We love to be in our passion. We love to be in our joy.
And to feel like we have value in the community that we're in. Like to feel that we have a purpose.
To be seen.
Yeah.
To be totally seen.
Yeah.
So I think what's really interesting is, me and Tosh talk about this quite a lot, is so this idea of like, let's say the American dream, that's probably close enough to it, is that you're gonna, you go to
Western
school,
ideology, yeah.
We go to school, you make a certain amount of money.
You get a white picket fence.
You get a secure job. You have a certain amount of kids.
Children. Yeah.
Yeah. You marry somebody, you have kids, whatever, and then all of a sudden, like, your life sort of like the conversation about that life sort of ends at like 40. There wasn't really. It's sort of like you work for somebody else's dream, and then you sort of hope that you have the physical wellness to be able to live for yourself. Or
you'll get 2 weeks off to maybe go to Hawaii once.
Exactly. And so, as obviously with the political climate around the world, and we're starting to see that the system isn't supporting anyone, why are we doing it?
Yeah, like, why are we buying and feeding into that?
Yeah. Like, what about...
I kind of feel like if everybody was just like, no, that it would just change kind of overnight.
Well, and this is the crazy thing, is that
we all just were like, I really want to be a painter, and I just don't want to be homeless. So how can I be both things?
Totally. And so something that I think is a beautiful solution to start really trying out in your own life and settling into the awareness of is that you are so powerful. And you have all of this unbelievable power to just not be complicit anymore. David Icke has this, I don't know if you know David Icke, but he's just like an alternative thinker and speaker. And he, something that is really beautiful that he says often, he's like, the whole thing could change in a dime if we just did the non-comply dance. Yeah. And we just celebrated, and we're like, hey, we have our own lives, and we want to be happy, and this, or as Bill Hicks said, this is kind of a piece of shit, so we're going to walk away.
This is a piece of shit, yeah.
So something that is just so beautiful to recognize is that you have so much more power than you realize, and a fear-based society wants to essentially disconnect you from that belief.
They want you to be unsure of every choice that you make, and they want you to be unsure that you're going to be supported or loved in those decisions. Like, so everybody's afraid to like speak their truth because they're afraid of repercussion. And what do you do about that?
Yeah, what do you do about that? And also too, I think something that we're really beating out of one another is this, in this political arena right now where everything has to be PC. It's really shutting down, and I've heard this from many friends who work in like very high up in corporate jobs, is that they're really noticing that because people are so afraid to offend each other and so afraid to say the wrong things, that it's really shutting people's creativity down and really shutting people's ability to have an opinion that might be
I'm not going
different.
deeper than the tip of the iceberg, because the tip of the iceberg is safe and PC.
Yeah.
And maybe digging any deeper than that, if it's going to ruffle anybody's feathers.
People shy away from it because they don't want to be ostracized.
Yep.
And that's a weird place for change to evolve from, because
change has never come out of that. Change has always come out of something that's radical or something that is unheard of at the time. That's what change is.
Totally. And this is another example of like why it's important. Why it's important to why.
Why? Ask why.
Is why it's important to really check in with yourself about when you make any decision in life, are you really sitting with yourself and going, does this serve me? Like, will this allow me to live in my authentic truth? Like,
does this make me happy? Even like the simplest question is like, people are doing things all the time in a day-to-day thing because they feel like they have to, as opposed to doing things that are their truth or that make them happy.
Correct. And I think then a simple thing to identify with that is that we live in a society, especially in North America. I can only speak to the society that I live in, but we live in a North American society where we value financial gain at all costs.
At all costs.
We value this rampant, diseased capitalism at the cost of our relationships, at the cost of our planet, at the cost of
throwing your neighbor under the bus,
at the cost
of the earth.
At the cost of the earth. And again, this is the biggest problem, is why are we doing that? Like, if we know that we have this human truth that connects all of us, this value system that connects all of us.
And that we have the ability on this earth with the technology and what we have right now for everybody to be supported and sustained.
If we were to live in balance, as opposed to the 99% taking, up all of the 1% taking up 99% of the world's resources. If we were to live a little bit more in balance, then we would have enough to provide anyone. So ultimately, like, we don't really have anything to be afraid of. But it's so interesting that why are we still playing this game systemically?
Yeah, the greed game, basically.
And or the value system, or supporting with our compliance, supporting the value system of a world that has nothing to do with the human value.
No, that has there's 8 corporations left or something. And what are we gonna do when one of them wins? What are we gonna do? Because one of them will eventually win. There will be somebody, in the way that we're going, in the way that governments and like the business sector is set up, that we will actually have one entity owning everything. And then what are we going to do?
Yeah, totally.
What is that world going to look like?
Totally. And because that's another thing too about asking why, and really sitting yourself with the questions of like what you believe in and how is that reflected and represented in your own life.
And how much do you really need? Because I just don't think you need $100 million.
And
that's not a lot in comparison to like how much people have,
Yeah.
How many yachts do you need?
Well, and this is the greater thing too, is we idolize, we've created this sense of idolatry with people who have all this extreme ornate wealth, but yet we do that without any kind of sensitivity or narrative around the true quality of that person's mental and emotional well-being. And in my experience in life, like, I've been around people who are extraordinarily wealthy, and a lot of those people...
They're some of the least happy people that I've ever met.
They're the least happy and the least healthy people, because it's not without its spiritual or emotional toll to actively do things that are harming yourself, harming the planet, and harming other people, and to do that consciously.
People you often don't know, but it's still harming other people.
Yeah.
And to do that day in and day out and signing, whatever documents you're signing that are causing those things to exist in the world. Like, I'm just not 100% sure how your sleep is at night.
Yeah. And
mine would not be good. Like, this is what, I have trouble sleeping anyway, because I'm like, what am I going to do? Oh my God, I have so many things to do tomorrow. Like, when you're an anxious mess, that's life. But if I were like fully being like, well, fuck the rainforest, I don't know how I would like, why?
Oh, let me just build.
I would just be like,
this isn't a bomb that I'm building that's going to be used on civilians
I love
in
this
Syria.
murder robot that I've just invented.
Like, what are we doing?
Oh, look, it'll just kill people for no reason.
Or like Elon Musk just selling 20,000 like fake flamethrowers. It's just like,
or FEMA and all of their like weird body urns. This is you can see where this is going to go.
But so you see how like starting to create in our daily conversations with ourselves and our communities and our families about asking like, why are we participating in something that isn't making us feel good, or why are we participating?
It's something that's going to be destructive to future generations too. Like, the thing is we're doing all these things now without actually really sitting down and thinking like, what is this going to look like in 100 years, in 1,000 years? What is this going to look like in 2 years?
It's very short-sighted.
And it's very now.
And we are having...
What can I have now?
Yeah, and we are having these conversations because we do recognize globally now that it is an unsustainable way of living. The environment can no longer support it. We are looking at systemic failures in terms of economic disparity that is like rampant across the world. More people, the middle class has completely disappeared. More people are having to work 3 or 4 jobs to survive and feed their children. More people are going to below the poverty line. And
people are one like surgery or one tragedy away from becoming a person who's like homeless on the downtown east side. Like people think that they're completely separate from those things, but we live in a society where that could be you in a New York minute.
Totally. And why, again...
And that doesn't make me feel safe, and that doesn't make me feel excited about the future.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's so interesting is that I believe so much in people power, and so does Tasha, and
like, we can do anything that we want to do if we come together and decide to do it.
And if we start returning the belief to ourselves and to our families and to our communities that we really
and to
our
children, because listen, they gotta fix this wrecked boat.
And we can be the examples of that also, but really returning this power and this belief system that, of course, no great change is ever going to be made from the top, but what are ways that we can do it in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming? Because I think a lot of time when I talk to people, and like I'm not perfect for having this figured out yet either, but people are like, oh, well, I don't want to start caring about the environment, or I don't want to start caring about this because then that's going to mean all the other ways that I'm living.
And I can barely pay my rent, and I don't have time, and I don't have,
you know. That's absolutely true. But
it's totally valid.
But I think, honestly, like the origin point of all of that is a bigger philosophical understanding and a bigger philosophical reclamation of the fact that you are totally powerful to create a life that you want to create that engenders happiness and fulfillment and nourishment no matter what amount of money you make. And I hear from...
And I think that is the vast majority of everybody. I think that that's the thing that people are thinking, you know, well, it would take too much, it would take everybody. But I think it is everybody. I think everybody wants to live in a world that is safe for future generations, that is safe for animals, that is safe for the environment, that we can... It's not that it's doable to live harmoniously. I don't feel like it's impossible to do these things. It's
not impossible. And there's so many amazing people. And this is the other thing, too. I'm so blessed to have, you know, people in my life who are these full, incredible examples who are really walking the walk about, you know, finding new ways and taking the resources that they've made from a monetary system and investing it in new technologies, new community building, communal living, permaculture farms, whatever it may be. There is so many incredible people all over the world who are making change on an individual basis. But I also definitely know I see people who feel probably shackled and enslaved and afraid because they have families to feed, that like maybe
and they're working
that's not available to them.
Week. Like they don't have a second to themselves, let alone a second to think about those things. Like that's what the disservice that this system is doing. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because you will do anything that you need to do to provide for your family, to provide for your children, and that's just how we are as human beings. Of course, we've always done that.
Yeah.
But we need to be able to do that more easily.
To be able to do them more easily and to start looking at why did we get away from balance so much? Like the work-life balance is insane. People are literally working themselves to death. Like we do have an active community where it's so convenient to buy things online, but yet that's at the cost of like hundreds of thousands of people in the world who are working in slave-like conditions. And we're not separate from that. Like I can't remember where I read it, so forgive me, but it's like only when we're all free can any one of us be actually free.
Yeah.
And that really does start at an individual level. Like when this is what this is about, is just creating a sort of dialogue and a forum for conversation around like, okay, cool. Like what are ways that I can show up that's a little bit more ass kicking for me as an individual, and therefore that will ripple out in my community.
Yeah, because everybody is their own oyster. Like I'm a musician, you know what I mean? You're a writer. Like everybody has a different thing to bring to the conversation and a thing to bring to the table. And there are things that I could never even think of. Like, I don't know how to make a special irrigation system.
Yeah, totally.
I wish I was that awesome, but like, I just don't know how to do that.
Oh my God, I can't even.
What can I do? I can sing to you.
Yeah.
Which is totally necessary. I'm not bagging on myself, but like, we need people from all walks of life, all cultures, and all everybody has such a different set of skills and a different set of knowledge. And I think that if we bring those things together,
and then
just think of what we could do.
And it's so interesting too, because like even when you actually start looking around your own community or people that you know professionally or acquaintances that you've met, really start getting in the awareness of like, wow, okay, cool. So like this person could, like I could skill trade with this person, or like this could help me achieve this dream, or this could help me do this. Like we really are each other's greatest resources.
Totally.
This belief that we need like a third party. I mean,
No, and
thankfully
the
with
idea
technology.
of trade too. I mean, like I am really into the idea of like, hey, you know, I can teach music lessons to your kids, and you have a vegetable farm, and I could take some pumpkins and like
Barter.
You know, and this is
no,
but check it. This is illegal to do this.
Where? When? What? It's illegal to barter?
It's illegal to barter in the States. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. Is it illegal to barter here? Canada?
I hope not. But regardless, I mean, like,
Yeah.
why? Why is that illegal anywhere to trade skills for skills? Because there's no third party, exactly what you're saying, because the government doesn't get its hands on it.
So creating gray and black market economies where you can do things for the people, by the people, is an amazing way to show up in your community and create an awareness that we don't always need big daddy government to kind of govern or create infrastructure for us.
Yeah,
Because
there are things that don't need to be taxed.
yeah,
Like
there's tons
you
of
can't
things.
tax my singing.
Yeah.
Can you?
And
They try, but
Well,
you can't.
And this is the thing too, is that we are not all part of a corporation. We're human beings living who are allowed and entitled to free land and sovereignty and things like that, just as part of our basic human rights. And I'm not going to pretend to think
It's like
that those
Nestle
things
and the
are going to
water.
happen.
It's like the water. It's like apparently we
Like
don't have a human right to water.
Well, she's just quoting a corporate person from Nestle saying that. But for example, that's a perfect example. Like, for example, example. But if a corporation can come in, steal water from a particular country without
They're
any
taking Canadian water for like nothing.
without any dialogue or awareness given to the public, and then to put it in plastic bottles and
sell
then
back to you.
resell it
and then
back
make
to
a
you.
garbage island.
And then have 4 billion individual use water bottles go into the landfill of the world every day. It's like, it's insanity.
That's like a single
So
example,
we-
and then there's like a plethora of
Many other examples.
It's kind of endless, actually. So what are the things that you could just do one thing differently?
Yeah, just like
You just
bringing,
not have Nestle water bottles ever.
and that's the other thing too, and we are all moving away from that, like bringing your own reusable coffee mug, like not buying those little weird plastic straws that are like swords that you
Oh yeah,
put in
they banned
tiki
straw.
drinks.
Like, you know, I feel like there's a lot of movements to try to do a lot of things, but they're like, it's like a microcosm. It's not a collective of everyone trying to do this. It's little tiny things that are still so separate from each other. So what are ways that we can bring all of those ideologies together to create one big giant fireball?
And a giant movement of non-participation. And the thing is,
Yeah.
and that this is the thing, is that
It's like a
that
quiet, beautiful thing you can do. Yeah.
and it gives you so much strength. So much of what I hear is like reaction based. So fear causes us to live in a state of reaction. We're not really necessarily manifesting or creating this life that we're dreaming. We're constantly in reaction to circumstance. And part of this onslaught of news of like this murder, this hurricane, this death
It's like
toll,
actually-
this
it's
cancer,
like actually unwatchable.
this.
Because it makes
It's
you
to
like, I'm
get
just going to
you-
go into the blankets and like not
Yeah.
live my life
Like, I
at
don't really
all.
feel excited about doing
I
anything.
can't even go grocery shopping. Fuck it.
And
Like-
and so we're constantly inundated with like fear and suspicion and prejudice when if you actually just went like when we really live outside, and I'm not saying outside as in just like physically outside, but when we live outside of that
You don't have to be a
storyline,
caveman to do this, yeah.
I think we can all just say, just in this one moment, if you believed that people were as terrible as they were, if the news was correct, you wouldn't be able to leave your house. But
Yeah.
we do leave our houses every day. And every day, I would argue that you probably have more beautiful interactions with human beings than you do negative ones.
Yeah.
So then why are we always constantly focusing on how shitty people are?
Yeah.
Because that is, of course, an aspect to us in a free will universe. We can all be shitty. We're always learning. We're always evolving. Sometimes we do things that are unconscious. But it's not all of the sum of our parts. And when we look at children, we understand that that's not really even our birthright.
They just want you to share the bucket and the pail.
Exactly.
And they just want to play
And they want to eat
sand.
and be happy and go outside.
Yeah, and they
hang
want
out
to eat it
trees.
with you. Like, that's the thing. Like, I'm constantly with children, and they're constantly giving you half their cornbread.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not in
Because
our...
they understand that only when we are all happy can one of us be truly happy. And this concept or this idea, I just want to share this personally really I'm really passionate about this, is that it fucking breaks my heart that I see so many people who have been born and been brainwashed into thinking that their life isn't worth anything.
Yeah.
That they think that they need to work for 40 years out at a mill for some, or wherever, for some company, like many different companies.
Who would replace you in 2 seconds?
Not only that, but has many corporations have stolen people's savings or their 401k or their RSPs, like we call them here, or whatever it may be, so that people are breaking their back and working overtime to, yes, of course, put food on the table, but for what? For ultimately to live somebody else's dream, for ultimately to live in a corporate structure that doesn't support you or appreciate you. And so at what point do we stop asking ourselves, why are we doing that? Because it's not the truth. It's really not the truth. And it's so nice that technology and our ability to see into other people's lives and different ways of living is allowing us to open our minds.
It is opening up the conversation. That's what we're doing too, but it is, the internet is really terrible for a lot of things, and it's really amazing for connecting people on this kind of level. People feeling like, I didn't know that was how everybody felt. You know what I mean? It's really refreshing and really like a safe thing. Yeah.
We can find people who are in reflection to us, because I, for one, do not see myself in the value system of a society that would rather value money or financial consumption and greed over relationship and over connection to the planet. Like I don't.
There's just a disparity between what you need to be happy and what you think that you want. In this kind of fear-based society. Like, that's the thing, is like, I want more than what somebody else has. But I'm like, but you don't. It doesn't make you happy.
It doesn't make
you need to have your needs fulfilled. Like, you need shelter, you need food, you need water. Like, there's like basic needs, and then there are like superficial needs.
Yeah, and there's a documentary called Happy that came out. There's been many different studies, we don't even need to go over that, but have proven that over $50,000 or $60,000 a year, or whatever it takes for you, depending on where you're living,
to have
your needs met, and a little bit of extra money to experience life, people generally aren't like changing their level of like happiness and excitement for life between $50,000 and $1 million. In fact, it's arguable that when you get up to $1 million, you have all of these different weird problems that you've never thought about, where you're suspicious of people's intention for you.
I would just be like ferreting that money off to other people. I wouldn't even have that much money ever. I just would never have it. I'd be like, oh, you need this, you need a car, you need this. Who needs it?
And having money is in itself not a bad thing.
No.
But when we are looking to have money or procure money from a system that doesn't support balance of resources,
to want more so that somebody else doesn't have enough is the issue.
Yeah. And that's coming back to, and then we circle it back down to so as human beings, if we know that I am you and you are me, then why are we allowing ourselves to be complicit in a fabric that is ultimately going to be toxic and disharmonious, And how can we give ourselves the opportunity to really start to take our power back? Because the moment that you say no, there's somebody who says like own your no's as much as you own your yeses, which is so fucking true.
Yeah.
Like the moment you start owning your no and being like, I have no idea what's gonna happen, but I definitely don't want to, I need to leave this job for my fucking mental health. When you leave that job, it can be terrifying, but oh my gosh, every time we try that out in life, how the universe provides to you, people show up, decisions like are easy to make when you are constantly showing up in a place that feels authentic to your heart.
Yeah, if you know it isn't meant for you, it isn't meant for you.
Yeah, and trust that feeling.
It's
like
trust
we're so in
gut.
our heads.
Yeah, it's the same thing about what we're always talking about, is like there's a voice inside of you that knows its truth and is beating down your heart's walls trying to tell it to you.
And if you are feeling disconnected from what you're learning, or say for example, like I want to be, you want to be a healer, and so you go into, and I had a couple of friends experience this, go into med school, and then like a year or two in, they're like, whoa, this is not exactly what I thought.
You get kickbacks for all these drugs, and like you're just like
literally, because of the corporate interest of it, it's so far away from me.
It's too embezzled with money. It's too like ingrained in a monetary system. Like healing is ingrained in that, food is ingrained in that. Why? I love this thing here. Why is organic food $800?
Yeah, and that's another thing. I'm just gonna finish this out really quick.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's just like when you're hearing that voice and you're a year or 2 years into that program, do you think that that's ever going to get better? Like, I think that actually it's like being in a marriage when we're unhappy.
Yeah.
It's like we have to honor what is true for us. And that's going to look different for everybody. And it's supposed to look different for everybody. And I think that this confusion around like everyone needs to be a lawyer, or everyone needs to do this, or everyone needs to be a superstar is, it is such an incredible amount of distracting propaganda, because we have to go in before we can figure out what we want to do and how we show up in the world.
I know people, like my parents have a friend named Dan who was an actor with them in Stratford. He went to, he became a doctor, like a medical doctor, like a family practitioner, and did it for 10 years and then quit and is now an organic farmer because he was like, I was basically, and this is like his full-blown quote, is like, I was basically not helping anyone and was a pill pusher.
Yeah.
And he was like, I can't do that. Like, that's not what I went in there to do. You say, like, use, like, the Hippocratic Oath schmoth. Like, what am I doing?
And that is such a fucking beautiful and perfect example of the fact that people are not the problem. People are actually...
People are so not the problem.
They're beautiful and good. And so many people come into different systems believing one thing, and then the system itself is designed to actually leach that out to fuel the overarching... God or whatever, the overarching objective of how can we suck as much money out of this as possible until everything else is dead.
Money. It's like that thing in What the Health. You guys have seen the documentary What the Health, I imagine, or if you haven't, you should check it out because it's awesome. There was like a thing in there where McDonald's is trying. There's like there's a committee that's trying to put more dairy into things, and there's just like an entire group of people being paid to try to put more
dairy
stuff. No, it's like the dairy committee, and then like just trying to like replace ingredients with fake ingredients because they'll save like 1 cent per chicken nugget and just think how many more dollars that they'll make, and just the idea that like people aren't worth. There's no monetary value on a human being.
On a human life, and that is so.
And they're $1.
But if we look too, so that
people are poor and they eat it, and that's why organic vegetables are. People can't eat that way. And people want to.
Yeah.
They can't.
And again, that goes back to, I think one of the most disgusting perversions of this monetary obsessed society is that we make this decision where people actually have to choose money over health.
Their own physical health.
Because, pardon me, those things are like, I'd be like, I'm just going to put my hand here. Because like an economic gain and human value are diametrically opposed to one another. Yeah. They're never going to like link up in a way that's like harmonious or
congruous thing where they're like, yeah, you're worth 35 grand and you're worth, like, what?
It's just even absurd to even put a value system on land or to put a value system on you.
You're worth every dollar that exists on this planet.
Like, it's crazy to me. But that is the most obvious glaring, if we're gonna, take a tangible thing from how we live. Why do families who make less money have to then somehow feed their children in a way that's less nourishing or healthy? Why all of a sudden is buying organic produce only for rich people, when really the question we should be asking is, why are we allowing the government to poison us in the first place?
Why are there non-organic vegetables?
Like, what? Like, what are you trying to say? Like,
it's the best thing. My dad was saying, he was like, well, there wasn't organic when I was a kid, and then he went, wait, because everything was organic.
Like, there's
50 years ago.
Not so long ago. This is why it's also so interesting, is because in such a short amount of time, we've managed to go from things being okay and up until like the 70s or 80s to now, I would say, honestly, in the last like 25 years.
The last 50 years.
How we've been sucking dry the resources of this planet and creating a culture around...
And throwing our people like just to the absolute wayside in terms of their...
dignity
and
their
physical health. Yeah.
And like now...
And mental health. That's not even a conversation. Do you know what I mean? Finally is now. Like, it's recently become a thing.
Where mental health is an issue. Yep. Because obviously if we live in an insane system, eventually we're going to go insane.
Yeah, it is depressing. Yeah, it's not you who is depressed.
No.
It's the universe telling you that the center can't hold.
Yeah, the center can't hold.
So if you're feeling those feelings, you're becoming aware of the fact that this isn't how we're going to be able to keep on keeping on.
No, and that's very normal to feel, because we're all feeling that on some level or another, because wisdom and truth and just awareness is like very much indicative of the fact, and now very tangibly evidence-based, that the way that we're going in terms of looking after each other and how devoid of morality and kindness and compassion our economic freight train is not going to do anything to serve these people ultimately. And if we are people and we are living in this system, at what point do we stand up and go, homie, ain't gonna play that shit anymore? And
I'm thinking it's got to be soon. You know, I think that's what we're talking about. I think that's what we're opening it up to everybody to talk about, is like, what do we do?
What do we do? And what are ways that we can start to look at each other as more similar than separate?
Yeah.
Because that's the whole thing too, is like creating these illusory walls of like, well, you're a male, I'm a female, and like,
and you're rich and I'm poor, and you're black and I'm white,
and I'm from this place and you're from this place, and it's like, yes, those things are aspects of our existence. All of us just
want some snuggles. Like,
we all want snugglies.
We just want some snuggles.
We all want clean air to breathe. Yeah, we all want fresh water to drink.
We want like a nice bed that isn't, rat infested. It's really like, they're not big things that we want.
Yeah, it's so true.
What do we want? Non-rat infested beds. When do we want it? Right now.
We want to be able to have shelter. We want safety. We want to be able to have the ability to experience.
And then beyond that, we want to be able to, like you were saying before, like be able to speak our truth and put our value onto the world and show the world what we are made of.
To feel safe.
Because that's the next level beyond having your needs met, is how you can
totally,
show yourself and be of value to society and matter.
And recognizing that is important and that voice is important. You don't have to be afraid of who you are, because you're not a mistake. You're not a flawed
design. We really
design.
need you to be who you are.
Everybody needs everybody to be who they are.
Yeah.
And everybody to be their newest version of themselves, whatever that may be. And it's so terrifying in this current climate of judgment and separation and prejudice and racism and political polarization. Like, are you left? Are you right?
And then not being able to talk about any of it. Yeah.
And we can't talk about any of it, because then you might offend somebody.
Racist or like
what? So like, wow, what a really like closed down way to exist that is, when all opinions should be valued, all experiences should be valued, all stories should be listened to. Because when we do that, then we recognize, holy fuck, this person over here that I just talked to was sitting at the bus stop with, wow, there's a lot I can relate to about that person's life. And there's a lot they can relate to about my life. And
I can learn from that person. And they can learn from me.
And then totally. And then in that moment, how much more difficult would it be to want to fuck that person over?
Yes!
Or to squash them because I'm making some brandishing, disgusting professional career move, which will ultimately mean nothing, because when you're...
Because you're not a statistic. That's the thing. Like, we're not
statistics.
You're an individual.
And we're all people that are living from an emotional, experiential body. And so I think...
if we could see ourselves and every other person as just as an individual, just as much as you are, like how hard it would be
to be hard.
To press that button.
Yeah. That's what allows us to be in softness and compassion with each other, is because we begin to see each other as each other.
Where's that conscience? Yeah, absolutely.
And we are so complicit right now in a society that holds no space for our commonality and so much space for our separateness.
To polarize us, absolutely.
To polarize us, because that's the most scary thing, right? Because
they don't want us to come together.
We collect and we unify and we reflect each other and the best versions of each other, and we honor each other and support each other, then we become a powerful force to recognize. So two things I just want to say that are really, it's like a funny, easy example to visualize is, so say like, yes, you want to have like 50,000 Lamborghinis, or like spend $1 billion on this, or get 1 million houses, or like whatever that model of success is currently. It's like hyper consumption.
It's so competitive, and there's no end.
Hyper consumption and hyper materialism. Okay, so say that's your life, and say you get on that and you want to play that game, and have you ever asked yourself, like, where does that road go to? Like, literally sit with that and imagine that for the rest of your life. You are like isolating yourself. You are hurting people a lot of the time.
And you'll sit on your piles of money.
And just sit on your, like Scrooge McDuck.
Like the Lorax, dude.
Yeah. And if you can get to those places being philanthropic and thinking about community, I'm not saying that that's not a possibility, because it absolutely is, and that's awesome.
To have a business savvy mindset and to be able to go out and make change, like that's so needed. I'm the opposite of that person. I can't even put like 4 cents together to like figure out how to do anything, but
I'm not there either, but
no,
but those are the stories we need to hear.
Yeah,
because why don't we hear about those stories more?
Because there are
in media?
So many people out there doing those exact
fucking
things.
slaying.
No, but you never hear about that
because they want you to believe in a version of reality that actually isn't reality, and it's so bizarre to me. And it's like, for example, like say for the elections that just happened in the States, I think really a lot of people were like, oh God, am I choosing between this obviously corrupt person or this obviously corrupt person?
Which one is the most new?
And so instead of maybe like we fighting each other and creating these extreme separations, I've known people who are like not talking to each other anymore because somebody voted for Clinton, somebody voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Instead of putting all that energy into constantly justifying why we made one decision or another, is it not more worth it to put energy into being like, hold on a second, why am I supporting a system that's like blatantly criminal?
Here's pile of shit A and here's pile of shit B.
Maybe it would be...
Can we have something that's just not a pile of shit?
Because I think if the system was truly transparent and working, obviously Bernie Sanders would have won the popular vote.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the system is controlled by things that are not designed, or there's no intention or motivation behind to ever actually have all of your needs met.
There's money behind all of it, right? There's greed behind all of it. And so we have to change every single structure that exists. We have to change government structure. We have to change business structure. We have to change social structure.
And we do that, and like that sounds like a lot for one day, but like we do that
tomorrow.
I do that.
Come with me tomorrow to the courthouse.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I mean, we do, like, stuff has to be dismantled and rebuilt.
And we can find ways to do that literally just by reclaiming our potential and our power. Because if on that election day, everyone stood up and talked to their neighbor and was like, dude, I'm not going to vote. This is gone. Like, this is nonsense.
Yeah, like if 85% of the population hadn't voted.
If everyone went onto their lawn and like had a fucking party with each other, and that day only 40,000 people showed up to vote, dude, the actual system would... For that, even if it were rebounded, but for that fucking day,
that would have proved something.
That would have stopped. Like, and that is so insanely amazing to, like, Gandhi's proved it, Martin Luther King has proved it. It seems like we're forgetting how very possible change is. And we don't need to do that anymore, because now is the time that we need all of the intelligence and all of the love and all of the compassion and all of the nurturing to really stand up for itself.
Yeah. You gotta heal yourself and then heal everything else.
So
we want to open it up. We want to know what, like, we just said a lot of things. So we're like, if you want to like bullet form that, but like, what are your thoughts on it? What are you feeling? Mm-hmm. What are some ideas that you have? What are some ideas that you've heard somebody else have?
On how we can just make
really anything
like, that actually feeds
any cool idea that you have ever heard.
Feeds love and doesn't feed greed, and that's really what it comes down to, is because the more loving you are to yourself, the more loving you can be to everybody else, and the more love your family and communities will have, and from that place we can make some really beautiful, profound changes. So
because I'm looking forward to a future that's full of love.
Yeah, we got it. I think we have a present full of love, so it's really just honoring that.
Or I'll be riding an armored bear.
Taking that to the next level. Okay. So thank you, man, for tuning in. I'm Vanessa.
I'm Tasha.
And let's start conversations.
This is a conversation project. Peace.